Everything Sherry said is true. I am a passionate home gardener. I grew up in Berlin, Massachusetts, and I grew up watching my dad garden. I used to go into his garden and maybe pull his carrots before they were ready and eat them, and now I know why he didn't like that, now that I've grown up and I have my own garden. I started off small gardening. I started in pots, and then I grew to maybe a 400 square foot plot, and then I've had gardens as big as 4,000 square feet. So me and my husband Chris, that's Chris over there, and that's our little sunflower, Charlie Brown. It's the three of us, and we have started from scratch 4 gardens in our time. And like Sherry said, I've been gardening about 15 years. I did do a few other things before this, but it's grown into a passion. I mean, I'm the type of gardener that actually starts to get seed catalogs in the winter, and the best reading in the winter garden-wise is to grab your seed catalogs and sit and daydream about the springtime coming. And this is the best time of year right now when everything starts to come up. And the first thing to come up would be asparagus. So this is a beginning gardener's class, and we might touch on some subjects that are a little bit further on, but in general it's going to be basics. And the things that we're going to cover are seed starting from home. We're also going to cover soil health, which you're going to find out is really important when it comes to growing a garden. It's really one of the most important things. And we're also going to have a few surprises during the day, which I think will be really nice. And I always encourage people to just learn as you go. Don't take gardening too seriously. I think the biggest thing is to have fun, to start where you are. You don't have to go out and buy a million things, although some of us ladies have affinity for shoes or for clothes, or maybe we get our hair done. I have an affinity for gardening things. I am a gardener. I mean, I might even be the crazy gardening lady. And you know, a lot of people think that they have to have a green thumb as well. In my opinion, I think it's a myth, because it's just like anything else. My sister-in-law is an accountant. I don't know how to do accounting, but it doesn't mean I couldn't learn. And it's the same thing with gardening. You can learn. It's something that's learned. It's not something that you're just born with a green thumb, because I've had many things fail, and that's the best thing about gardening is you learn from your mistakes, just like in life, right? We learn from our mistakes, and that's the thing. And something that might work for you may not work for you. It has a lot to do with soil, and there's just so many factors that, you know, I wouldn't count any failures as a failure. It's a learning thing. I also suggest, if you have a garden, this is something I've learned a little bit later on, and I'm glad I have, is to beautify the space. When you walk into your garden, one of the best things about gardening is what it feeds into you, what the feelings that you get from it. You know, it's just such a nice, it's a nice hobby to me. So I've been dabbling a little bit more in flowers so that when I walk into my space, it's not only functional. I used to just be grow what you can eat, grow what you can eat. And now I have flowers sprinkled throughout. Granted, I can eat most of my flowers, but it's nice. You can walk into a space that's got a lot of color and beauty as well. So there are a lot of reasons to garden, and I'm going to start off with this, is health. One of the things is you get a lot of whatever you're growing, obviously is healthy for you. You know, you're taking in this stuff, it's got fiber, you're getting physical exercise while you're out there, you're getting fresh air. When you put your hands in the soil, there's actually a beneficial bacteria that promotes serotonin, and this is a scientific fact. So we were made to be in a garden. You get your hands in that garden, and it literally gives you serotonin levels that make you happier. It'll reduce stress, and I can definitely vouch for that. You know, it's my happy place. So before we start, remember what this is, okay? You see this little thing right here? I'm just gonna put it to the side, and we're gonna look at it later. Okay, so let's start. This is our gardening basics class. And we're gonna start with some food facts. There are approximately 400,000 species of plants in our world. And this is just an approximation. And it's estimated that about half of them are edible, okay? And this is, a lot of the times, what you see around us, there's a lot of things that are edible that we have no idea about. You could actually, technically, eat your grass. It's not gonna digest very well, but technically you could eat your grass if you wanted to. So 20 species provide about 90% of our food, which I think is pretty amazing. I mean, just 20 species. So typically when you go into a grocery store, there are about 200 fresh fruit and vegetable varieties in our grocery store, which isn't a lot in comparison. So we gotta ask ourselves, why do we even wanna grow food at home? Why would you wanna grow food at home? Well, flavor, okay? There's something inside of fruits and vegetables that give them flavor. It has something to do with the sugar content, the Brix content. It's BRIX. And what can happen is, if you overwater, let's just say you're gonna go out and pick a tomato in the afternoon, right? Do you think there's a right time to pick a tomato? Well, there is if you want it to have a lot of flavor. If you want your tomato to have a lot of flavor, you don't want to pick it after a rainstorm. Because what happens is the soil gets saturated and it flushes out those sugars out of the tomato. And what you want to do is pick it after you have a dry spell. That's when you get that really big tomato flavor and it's really sweet. You know, that's the best time to do it. It concentrates all the sugars inside of your fruit. So we know that when we go to the grocery store, has anybody tasted a homegrown tomato? Give us all right, so most of us have. We know that it's completely different than when you go into a grocery store, right? Somebody said, and this is somebody that I've followed on, actually, the woman that wrote this book right here, she had mentioned that when you bite into a tomato at the grocery store, it's the taste of disappointment. Because it's really, you know, it's bland, it's without flavor, and that's the case with a lot of things. It
tastes like cardboard.
It does, it does. And I want to encourage you guys, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Not an expert, but like Sherry said, I have some years experience and I'll do what I can to answer questions. So flavor is a big draw for us. And then there's freshness, right? When you get to the grocery store and you're picking through all these fruits and vegetables, a lot of them have been picked before they're ripe. So they're either ripening on the shelf at the store or they've been ripened with, I think it's called ethylene gas, right? They do this, they expose it to this gas and it ripens the fruit. But there's nothing like when you go out to your garden and you pick something that's vine ripe. It's entirely different. So it travels for miles, you know, it sits on the shelf a long time. It's just not so appealing. So then there's another reason, pesticides. Everybody knows about that. We don't have to go too far into that. There's, you know, our stuff is covered in pesticides. When you have a home garden, you can control that situation. You know, ideally for us, we'd rather not spray, but I'm gonna say there have been times where we haven't had a lot of time on our hands, and we have a bit of a larger garden that I've chosen under heavy bug pressure to spray. There are natural things that you can use. You can use a combination of like Castile soap and neem oil. Okay, you get 100% neem oil. You mix these things together. You might combine it with garlic and cayenne pepper. The thing about these things is you need to spray these, and then if it rains, lots of times these things wash off, which is great if you're able to spray and respray. These things can be pretty effective. But we have been known to occasionally spray, not often, very rarely, unless we absolutely have to. And then there's nutrition, right? Modern agriculture depletes the soil. And that's where all your nutrition comes in. And we'll learn more about that as we go. But a lot of the nutrition that the vegetables have is uptake by the minerals inside of the soil. And modern agriculture, they basically are concerned with NPK, right? Has everybody heard of NPK? That's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And these things will help your plant look good, grow okay, but it doesn't have all those. It helps with growth, fruit and flower, and the root system. But it doesn't necessarily produce a flavorful piece of fruit. You know, that's where the minerals and the micronutrients and these microorganisms come in when it comes to our soil. And the stuff inside the store is a fraction of nutrition of what our homegrown vegetables have. I mean a fraction of the nutrition. I mean, it's just really getting more and more depleted. But those of us that are gardeners and just people in general are starting to learn more about health and about gardening. There's been a big wave of popularity in gardening, especially lately. And I've noticed that, you know, I used to be able to wait for a while before I ordered my seeds. Now sometimes things are just completely sold out, you know, that would normally be there. There's a big rush on seeds, and the seed companies have talked about that, shown that there are a big push that everybody is pushing to garden. So let's go on to our next. And then there's variety. Now, you go into a grocery store and you see just a sliver of variety, and I'll give you an example. Tomato, okay? What do we have? 4, maybe 5 different kinds of tomatoes in there now. You got your cherries. Now you're starting to see these ones that are multicolored inside the big packages. You might even see a brown tomato. Have you seen those inside the packages, right? They'll sell an occasional heirloom tomato. Do you know there are about 10,000 different types of tomatoes? And that goes for fruit and vegetables across the board, not to mention, I mean, even a thing like a kiwi. We didn't see a kiwi some years ago. This came into the country, and this was common in New Zealand, but to us it was foreign. I mean, think about all the fruits and vegetables there are all over the world that we haven't been exposed to, not to mention all the ones that have been lost. I mean, there are heirloom seeds that are coming up. There are some companies like Baker Creek who does all heirloom seeds. There's a lot of old varieties that have been lost, but families have held on to them, and they're bringing all these seeds back, which is really nice. And then there's convenience. There's nothing like being able to walk out your back door and go into your garden and just pick something fresh. You know, you got herbs and the expense, right? A garden can save you a lot of money, and I know I'm going to hear noise from over in that direction again. It hasn't saved us money, and that's just, you know, that's my fault. But yeah, I mean, you go outside of your kitchen and to have a whole set of herbs there waiting for you, and herbs are pretty expensive in the grocery store, right? Yeah. They are. And I mean, even the convenience part alone, to not have to jump in the car and go to the store, just to go out in your backyard. And how fresh, you know, how fresh is everything? It's wonderful. And then this is a subject that has been more prevalent now, food security. This really wasn't a subject up until a few years ago, not in the larger population. And even now, since everything's calmed down, there are still spots, if you really look, there are still spots on the grocery store shelves that maybe they have doubles and triples of things because they're trying to fill spots. I know we had experiences of looking for things that we were used to or accustomed to having, and they weren't there. And the way everything is right now, there's a little bit of there's a concern that our food chain might have a problem. So that's just a thought to have in the back of your head. So now we come to, how do we start? Where do we start? So the first place to start is asking yourself these questions. When to grow? So the first thing you want to know is your first and your last frost dates. I think anybody that gardens knows that you need to know these things. And what you can do is there are sites, you can just type in your zip code a lot of times. We're actually going to have some handouts that we're going to give out later that talk about this. Our zip code right here in Hudson, we're zone 6B. In Massachusetts, it spans from 5A to 7B. That's about our window. And I mean, 7 is off in the Cape. But we're around 5 and 6 here in our area, pretty much. Chris and I are 5B. We're up in Athol, so we're a little bit colder than everybody else. The lower numbers are colder, the higher are warmer. So in our growing season, there's about 150 days. And if you want to plant something, if you get a packet of seeds, you notice on the back, you're going to see some information. And it also tells you how long it takes for that thing to grow, right? So that's what you have to do. If you want to, say, grow a watermelon, which is a little bit harder here in our area, but there are varieties like Sugar Baby that we can grow here. There's more than just one. There's actually several. But if you wanted to grow a rattlesnake watermelon, it's probably not going to happen here. That's one of those big old watermelons with all the seeds in them we used to see. We're hardly used to seeing seeds in watermelons anymore, really, right? You're not going to be able to grow a rattlesnake watermelon around here unless you have some pretty special conditions, maybe some controlled conditions, and then you bring the plant out really old. And if you have some off time, it's not going to develop. You're just not going to have a hard time. But there are ways of growing, and I've been real successful. In fact, last year we had a great watermelon haul. They can be a little bit tricky, just knowing when they're ripe and all that, but there's ways to tell that. We had a pretty successful watermelon haul. So let's see. So where to grow? You have to decide what you're interested in, obviously. I mean, you're going to know where your space is. What kind of a gardener are you going to be? I mean, I consider gardening, you can be a gardener on your windowsill, on your kitchen counter. You can be a gardener that has 2 acres, more, or you can grow inside little containers. You know, you can do container gardening, raised bed gardening, that kind of thing. So what to grow? You're not going to grow a pineapple around here. You know, and again, you're not going to grow a rattlesnake watermelon around here. You want to see what's suited for our area. And again, you'll be able to refer back to your grow days. And in general, I mean, we have a great resource now that we have the internet. We're able to, at the click of a button, you know, research so many different things. Let's see. We have to ask ourselves, too, what do we like to eat? Because oftentimes, and I know when Chris and I started off gardening, we would grow things because they look cool, right? Yeah, let's grow this. This will look good. But then at the end of the season, we didn't eat what we were growing. You know, we would grow these things and we would just leave them out in the garden or give them away to somebody. Now we've learned that we need to grow what we like to eat. And that's one of the biggest suggestions I can make too, is grow what you like to eat. And again, we have to ask what grows well in our area. And inside this handout, there's a section where, and I will point that out later too, that I suggest different seed companies. One of them is Fruition Seed. And there are some seed companies that you'll find that cater to our areas, you know. So in the more northern climates, they'll specialize in seeds that are for our area, which is nice and convenient because you know if it's going to grow in New York, it's going to grow here. And that's the thing too, is not only what will you eat, but what will you use? You have to think about how you're going to use it too. And will you keep something, this goes along with the next one too, is will you want to grow things that are going to keep for a longer period of time? Are you going to store things? Do you want to keep things over? I'm talking about like winter squashes, like potatoes and things like that. A lot of time people think winter squashes are squashes that you grow in the winter, and they're not. Mm-hmm. They're squashes that you start in the summer and you keep over in the winter time. So we're going to talk about methods of gardening. So there's your conventional gardening.
Amanda?
Yeah?
Explain what it means by keeping over.
Keeping over.
Harvesting it and then holding it into like a bin or whatever over the winter time.
Yeah, some people have root cellars,
Yeah.
and they're lower temperature. And what you do is you take those crops that keep well, and that's the other thing is you can, like if you're going to grow an onion, for example, there are onions like Washington onion that won't keep very well over the winter months. I'm talking about storage things, and I actually have a list of crops that are more geared towards storage. That's what I mean by that. Yeah, some people will have root cellars. Other people, you can do it in your own basement. If you store things, you can actually even overwinter things in your garden. Like you can leave carrots inside of the ground, and if you heavily mulch them, you can go out in the middle of wintertime and pull carrots. You know, kale is great. Actually, greens, a lot of our greens, once they've been frosted, they're sweeter. You know, if you taste kale, you know, not everybody's a fan of kale, but I'll bet you there'd be a lot more fans after we've had a frost because it sweetens that green. And it really makes a big difference. Even carrots too. Carrots are that way. You can leave your potatoes in for a long period of time if you mulch them heavy. It's the same thing. You can go out and pick potatoes when it seems like it would be too cold to pick potatoes. So let's look at the methods. There's the conventional garden, which everybody thinks about. You rototill, you know, you pull up the earth, you clear everything out, and then you fight weeds. Usually you fight weeds. And last year, if you remember, we had a ton of rain. If anybody here had a garden and they had a conventional garden, most people lost most of what they had. And it was because they had in-ground gardens. You can still have an in-ground garden, though, and beat that. We have several different methods in our one garden. We have raised beds, we have in-ground gardens, we have garden bags. We have several different things, but because we mound things, the water's able to run off of it. Where if you have a regular conventional garden and it has gullies and stuff, it sits in water and things are just, I mean, I've just heard so many people having such a hard time last year because of all the rain that we had. So, but there are things you can do in conventional gardens, and you can incorporate it into these other things too, these other types of gardening. Which one is well-aged, and I'm going to stress that, well-aged wood chips. Wood chips will save you a ton of time. You can actually probably cut your work in half with wood chips, and I say that because it's a mulch that keeps, have you ever had a piece of wood in your yard or something, and everything else is bone dry, and you lift that up, and there are earthworms under there, it's wet, you see moisture and everything. It's the same idea with wood chips. And the wood chips may even dry out on the top, you know, but underneath, everything's staying moist. It cuts way down on weeds. And even if you do get a weed, when you pull those weeds out of wood chips, they come out so easy. You know, you don't get those weeds so much with the deep tap roots that you gotta fight, to get them out, and they have these giant tap roots. You don't really get those in wood chips. And the other good thing about that is these wood chips are breaking down, and they are feeding the soil also. It's adding nutrition into your soil. And soil, and I was going to cover this later, but soil is modest. Think about it this way. It likes to be covered. When you look out into the woods, what do you see? You don't see a bunch of rototilled ground. Is there anything having trouble growing out in the woods? No. Because we have leaves falling on top of everything. It's starting to pile up. There's life underneath it. It's holding moisture. It's doing all the things. If we replicate that, you'll find a lot of success in gardening.
Wood chips, now, is that like a natural, regular? You can't use like a mulch that you get at Home Depot?
No, you could, but you probably wouldn't want to eat what you grew in it. And that's a great point. And a good source for wood chips, you'll find, although people are starting to catch on to this a lot more now, you see a lot more people using wood chips. But what we've done and what you can do is call your local tree company, and they'll come. They're always looking for places to dump their wood chips. They'll come and they'll dump their wood chips on your property, and you gotta wait a while. I would say a good 1 to 2 years before you use your wood chips on top of your garden. You can use it, but you have to move the wood chips off to the side and plant your plant. And the thing that happens is because those wood chips haven't broken down yet, they suck up nitrogen out of your plants. And it will affect the growth of your plants if those wood chips get down into the soil. I mean, when you use wood chips, you need to kind of move them off to the side anyways when you're putting your seedlings in. It's not so good, like if you have a carrot bed, you're better off with a lighter mulch, maybe a straw or something, once they start to get established.
I've heard about using like pine needles, like dry pine needles, as like
Yes.
mulch or whatever, just to help keep things moist.
Yes, you can do that. Pine needles might raise the acidity in your soil just a little bit. They're fantastic for rhododendrons and blueberries and things like that. Blueberries love pine needles. Crops that are a little more acidic.
The straw, you said you use straw. You have to be careful that there's not seeds in the straw.
100%. And that will happen. If you use hay especially, you'll get weed seeds. Oh, and what was I going to say? The hay feeds the soil. Straw, not so much. We've just found some at Tractor Supply, and it's chopped straw. You do get a little bit of weed seed, but it's not bad. And the other thing is because there's a mulch there, those weeds are going to pull up pretty readily. It's not real hard to pull those seeds up. So you can put wood chips down on a conventional garden, and you can be real successful. Cut down a lot on your work, a lot on your watering, a lot on your weeding. Your plants are healthier. They're getting fed. It's really a win-win situation, And you can also use those wood chips in your aisleways. We've been working towards, and you'll see pictures of our present garden, but we've been working towards not having to mow the aisleways. It looked pretty with the grass, but it's a lot of upkeep when you have to mow in between all your beds and all that stuff. So we've this year finally just about gotten it all wood chipped, and it makes it a lot neater. You got some tufts of grass and stuff growing up. And then honestly, if you ever want to grow in your aisleway for any reason, once it starts to break down, you can literally just plant in your aisleway because you've had all these wood chips breaking down inside of there, and you'd be surprised how gorgeous the soil gets. There are some people that have had horrible, hard soil, and they've just piled wood chips on top of them. This is how a lot of people start gardens, and this is how we start gardens. If you have an in-ground garden, another thing to do is you take cardboard. I think we got enough cardboard with Amazon boxes, right? So you break down your Amazon boxes, whatever cardboard you get, you lay that down first. You can even lay newspaper down, actually a decent amount of newspaper. Then you put the broken down wood chips over the top of it, and cardboard. You know who loves cardboard? Worms. Worms love cardboard. It's going to call up worms. which going to aerate your soil. They're going to leave their leftovers there, which are fantastic for your garden. It's just another win-win situation, and it just suppresses all the weeds. Another thing you can do is you could take a tarp. Say you wanted to start a garden next year, and you have a lawn, right? Take one of those heavy-duty tarps, lay it down in the place that you want, hold it down with something on the corners. When you come back next season, all your grass is going to be gone. And you have a garden plot to start in, So that's pretty cool. So then we got raised beds. Raised beds have become real popular. There's a lot of ways to make raised beds. People are making them out of all kinds of things. We have a little bit of a mix. What's the name of that method that No, the one that it preserves the wood. Takibon? Shoshugibon, that's right. A lot of people now are using wood. There's cedar is more available out in the West. We don't have it as much here, or is it cedar? But anyways, the woods that don't break down as readily are more grown out in the West. It's a little bit harder around here, a little bit more expensive. So we have a tendency to do things with more pine or whatever. That stuff breaks down a little bit more. But what you can do is take, and we have a torch, and you torch that wood, and it preserves it. Have you ever seen anything that's been burnt, but it stands for a long time, like a structure? Nothing happens to it. It doesn't rot away. That's what happens with that method. You can do that as well. So there's all kinds of raised beds. They're selling metal kits now that you can get, and you can even get them, and you get one kit, and you can put it in all kinds of different ways. You can make it a long bed, or you can make it into an L. They have all kinds of stuff like that now. So the big advantage of raised beds, and I really like them a lot. One, I'm getting older. I can sit on the edge of the bed and work on my garden. Another thing is you can control the environment a lot inside of a raised bed. You also, when you're doing an in-ground garden, a regular conventional garden, you have a little bit, sometimes more of a hard time of controlling certain parameters for certain plants. This way you can, it's more controlled area. And again, the drainage, it's great for drainage. Whereas you're going to have maybe a little bit more trouble with a conventional garden. But you can make heaped rows for conventional gardens. That's how we grew our tomatoes, because the in-ground garden that we have in the back, excuse me, is has raised furrows, and the water ran off of it, so it was much better than putting them on flat ground. And then we got square foot gardening. Now this isn't something that I've done. I've seen it, but it's a way of separating everything so that each individual plant has 1 square foot to grow in. So if you have a 4x4 plot, you got 4 plants, you got 12 plants that you can plant in there all together. And that's kind of like, to me, it seems a little more gimmicky method of doing things, but if you're not into how to space plants and things like that, it's nice, and it's a neat way to keep everything. So I could see the benefits of it. Then there's vertical gardening. Okay, we do vertical gardening too. And this is good if you don't have a whole lot of space. You're going to see, when we see pictures of my garden later, you're going to see these trellises. They're big metal trellises. But you know what they actually are is you can go to Tractor Supply and get something called a cattle panel. Cattle panel was around $30 last time we bought one, but it's about 4 feet wide. What did you say, about 12 feet long-ish? 16? Are they 16? Okay. So, and you can bend these. You can even cut them into different shapes. They have hog panels too that aren't as wide. But you just bend them, and you have an instant trellis, and it's a trellis that lasts. It's thick, you know, and it can hold a lot of weight. It's awesome. So we have, it's like we have 2 beds that are 24 feet long, and we have 3 of those cattle panels with some breaks in between. But when those are full up, it actually adds beauty to the garden, right? You're walking through and all your beans are budding, so you're seeing all these beautiful flowers and things hanging down. It makes it easier to pick things, and it saves a lot of space too. Those beans, if you were to let them go, they'd be all over the ground. I mean, you wouldn't be able to walk. You can even, like a watermelon, we did some watermelons upright last year too. So, and I got these, I went on Amazon and I should have brought some of these red bags, like you get onions in, you know how you get the netted bags? Well, they sell those on Amazon, like 300 of them. And what you can do is as your watermelon starts to grow, stick it inside that bag, tie it on your trellis, and you just leave it. The thing can grow to full size and it'll just hang there, a 12-pound watermelon just hanging off of these trellises. They can hold that much weight. So that's what's great about them too. And also you can see, like cucumbers, have you ever tried to pick cucumbers? They blend in with all the leaves. You miss them and you end up having a cucumber like, you know, this big. All right, I'll keep this one for seed. But it's a whole lot easier to see too. You're able to walk through this trellis and see all, you know, you see it a lot better anyway. Sometimes you can still miss them, but, you know. And then you got hydroponic gardening. This is not something I've done, read a little bit about. I don't have as much knowledge in this area. I know that there are systems that are self-contained. Some people even keep fish so that they don't have to put any nutrition into the water or very minimal nutrition. And it's a whole enclosed system. And what they do is there's lots of different ways to do it. You see them here in tubes, and this looks like a pretty big operation right here. But they'll either put liquid nutrition into the water or the fish will feed, and they grow algae. They'll get a certain type of fish that will eat algae. The algae grows in mass. And then these fish eat the algae. The fish, poop, okay? That goes into the water and it feeds those greens or whatever it is that you're growing. The roots hang down with no soil into the water. And then it's just a complete cycle, you know, which I think is kind of neat. I kind of like dirt, you know, I like soil though. I think I would like to try it. But then there's straw bale. Haven't done this one either, but people will take actually bales of straw, line them up, you know, and they put their plants directly inside of them. They wet these bales down, and just like with the wood chips, these bales start to break down and feed the plant, and you know, there's no soil required. It just breaks down, and then you can actually, it'll just keep breaking down, and then you have another place that you could potentially plant into. You could make an in-ground garden. That's a great way to start an in-ground garden too. Hugelkultur. This is a mound. This actually starts with, and this is more kind of imitating nature in a way that it starts with wood, logs, sticks, leaves, grass clippings, all kinds of stuff, and you make it up into a mound. And the idea is it just breaks down and keeps feeding the plants. And you just plant into this mound. How has anybody here had a compost pile where you get what we call volunteers in the garden world? Things just come up, right? And that's the other thing about gardening is things want to grow. And I have an example of that. I think people get caught up in the idea of having the green thumb, right? Things want to grow. Okay, I have a worm bin down in my basement, and I'll tell you, well, maybe I'll tell that story now. But in it, I tossed some potato peels. And this is what was coming up out of my worm bin. I didn't do anything to this. I just tossed these in there for the worms to eat. And this, hopefully I don't rip it apart, is what I got. Look at those roots. This is a potato peel. You know, either you're putting a whole potato or you're what they call chitting. You chit your potatoes, which is you find an eye or two in the potato, you cut it, you let it dry out maybe on a piece of newspaper, and then you stick that in there and you'll get a potato plant. I could get a potato plant from this. It might be a little bit weaker, but look at this. I mean, it's growing out of nothing, almost nothing. And look at all the roots on there. And this was just supposed to rot in the worm bin. So I thought that would be a good example of how things want to grow. So yeah, that's the hugelkultur. It'll start to break down. And you can also, if you do have higher raised beds, you can also save soil by putting in logs, sticks, twigs, anything to fill the bottom. And then maybe you fill this much of the top with soil that's decent. And you can plant into that and it'll break down. It'll also make it so that the bed settles. And every year when you come back, you got a little more room. There's room to add that compost, that fresh compost on top. And you don't have to disturb anything. We'll get into that too later, because that's a really big deal. So hugelkultur is another method. Then,
Worm story, I thought you meant.
no, maybe I'll wait. Then there's hanging baskets. You know, there are plenty of things that you can grow in hanging baskets. If you don't have a lot of room, you can grow things like strawberries. And have you seen those upside down tomato plants? You know, there are things that will lend themselves to growing well inside of a basket. You'd even see those vertical gardeners. I don't know if you've seen those things that stack up on top of each other. And the name's escaping me right now, but you water them from the top, and there's holes at each layer, and each one feeds down to the next. And a lot of people have been buying those too. I mean, there's so many ways you can garden, and nothing's really wrong. And then there's permaculture. Permaculture is more earth-friendly. Their motto is earth care, people care, fair share. That's what they say in permaculture gardening. Basically what you're doing is you're trying to garden without disturbing nature. You're planting things that coincide with your natural surroundings. That's a kind of a simple way to put it. You know, it's kind of vague, the definition of permaculture gardening. But it's just a way to garden without disturbing anything around you so much. You're planting all these things. Some people plant now what they call food forests. There's a guy in New Jersey, in fact, I have him in the handout, his name's James Prigioni, where he has a food forest out in his backyard. You walk out and literally you have shade trees that naturally shade fruits and vegetables that like a little bit of shade. You have things that all have a symbiotic relationship. You know, they're all working together, which again, it's kind of like mimicking nature. You go out into nature and things just naturally blend together, you know? So that's permaculture in a small nutshell. And then there's edible landscaping. What I can think about with that is things that you would put in your yard that may be pretty, but you can also eat them. Right? Like even a blueberry bush. A blueberry bush, if you've ever seen it in the fall, turns a real fiery red. They're beautiful. You know, there are things that have flowers. A lot of the times, the things in our garden have flowers, right? Because a lot of things we call vegetables are actually fruits, and they start with a flower. And you start with this beautiful thing, and it ends up something you can eat in the end. You're basically, lots of times, eating seeds in some cases, but you can do edible landscaping. And then there's greenhouses. I mean, you could grow some of the things. I imagine you could grow a pineapple here if you had a heated greenhouse and you had a controlled environment. And it also, greenhouses, you know, a lot of our food in the grocery store is actually grown in greenhouses, right? Those controlled environments. But it's nice, if you have a greenhouse, you can extend your seasons. You can start your season earlier. You can put your seedlings outside earlier. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with a greenhouse.
Do you have one?
Do I have a greenhouse? Greenhouse? No. You know what you can do too? You don't have to buy a greenhouse per se. You can take those cattle panels. I don't know if you've ever seen that. You bend the cattle panels, a few of them in a row. You attach them together. You get some plastic, some 6 mil plastic somewhere around there. You drape it over that, you pull it tight, and you got a makeshift greenhouse. I mean, you can do stuff. I have hoop houses.
Clear plastic, right? Clear plastic.
You can even have the stuff that's a little bit hazy. It'll still work. Yeah, but clear plastic would be.
Dark.
No, not dark plastic. No, not dark plastic. But what we do is we have raised beds. They're 4 feet wide, a few of them, and 24 feet long. And what we do is we go to Home Depot and we get the 1/2-inch PVC pipe that you can bend. They're about 12 feet long. You don't even have to do anything but stick them into the soil on both sides, and you're making a hoop, right, all the way down. And then you just take this plastic and stretch it over it, lay it down, put things on the side to hold it in, and you got yourself a little greenhouse, or a low tunnel is what they call them. And then there's cold frames. Cold frames, you can actually, a lot of people will take old windows and build these things that oftentimes are up against a house or, and they build the soil up in a way with manures and things like that, that it actually heats the soil as it breaks down. And they have a window on the top, and it's usually, you see how that's tilted like that? And they pull the window down, and it's like a mini greenhouse in there. And you can grow things in the dead of winter in a cold frame, if it's planned right. And then there's container gardening. And it said on the flyer that we were going to talk about small space gardening. And there's something now called grow bags. This is one thing. I don't know if everybody has seen grow bags. You can get them square, which I'm not crazy about these. I'm going to be honest with you. These square ones cave in on themselves. And I don't like them. In fact, if anybody wants this, they can have it. You'll take it? Do you want it? You can have it. It's all yours. You got it. But they have all kinds of sizes. And these particular ones are BPA free. They're recycled. They're permeable. They heat up. They're durable, which they are. We've had some out in our garden now for 3 years. And I mean, we can pick them up by the handles. They're not deteriorating. And they're breathable. And I was going to talk about this later, but I think, well, maybe I'll wait. Remember that these are, you can air prune in these. Remember that phrase if you can. This is air pruning. So this is one of the smaller ones. Air pruning. Air pruning, like the air we breathe. Okay? They go in all kinds of different sizes that will fit your space. And they just get bigger and bigger. See my point? And these are wonderful. They really are. I think they're space savers and they're convenient. If you don't like where something is, say you've started a garden and it's not as sunny as you thought it was going to be, for some reason you didn't track the sun real well, grab somebody and grab a handle, because they're pretty heavy once they're filled. They're very deceiving. You might want to go out. So they're pretty durable. You can pick them up with all that soil in them and they'll hold together. I was surprised when I first started to use them. The only downfall I see in these is the idea that they dry out a little bit faster. They might, here comes Chris. They might dry out a little bit faster. You might need to water them a little bit more. But they're fantastic. I really like them. They've added a lot of good stuff to our garden. And the other thing that we did last year was we have a fenced-in garden, and we took grow bags and put them on the outside. Things that are less likely to get eaten by varmints, critters, anything that's going to eat your stuff, we put along the outside in grow bags. And if we had a problem, we move them. You can buy these on Amazon. You can just press in grow bags. That's it, or cloth grow bags, and you know what this is great for too, is potatoes. If you've ever planted potatoes, whether it be an in-ground garden or a garden bed, do you have another potato plant next year by chance? Because it's hard to get rid of potatoes. And the other thing about potatoes is they suck up so much nutrition out of your soil. That's a crop you definitely want to rotate. So it lends itself well to being inside of a grow bag. You see that they sell actually potato bags sometimes. You can even take, you know, the reusable grocery bags that you get that you pay $1 or something for in the store? You can actually put soil in those and grow potatoes in those. I've seen people grow potatoes in trash bags, you know? Yeah. As long as you might want to poke a hole or two in them. You want to be able to get some drainage in there. But I mean, it's awesome when you grow your potatoes inside of a bag and you can just dump it out after because you're sure you've gotten every potato out of there. Because usually you'll leave one in the ground. In fact, last year we left so many potatoes inside of our grow bags, and I just know we won't have to plant in a lot of these bags because there's still potatoes inside there. And you know that we have a work garden as well that we started, and we've been growing potatoes there.
Amanda, you say you put some of the grow bags outside the fenced garden so that varmints won't eat. What are the things that varmints won't eat?
Well, it depends what kind of varmints you get. I mean, like deer will eat just about anything. But for some reason, the deer don't bother our stuff. And we actually have deer that go through our property, but for some reason, they don't eat our things. You know, we haven't. But we did have a groundhog last year, and groundhogs will even eat through chicken wire. I couldn't believe it. He was living under our ride lawnmower inside of the garden shed. He had it made. And we have one of those big long storage containers that they use on the big freight, the freight ships, the ones that you open the big doors on. They have like a mansion underneath there. So it was tough. So probably a third of our garden got decimated last year by a groundhog until we were able to very kindly relocate him. And we did. We relocated him and a skunk. And that was a funny scene. Chris trying to relocate a skunk. Okay, skunky. Okay. That's what he was doing. But he very gently got relocated somewhere else. So container gardening, fantastic if you don't have a lot of room. You can use 5-gallon buckets. You can use anything that you have. And that's the thing about gardening too. Don't wait until you get all the stuff that you want. Start right where you are, with whatever you have. Is it great to have a perfectly organic garden and do everything just the right way and walk into this gorgeous space? Chances are, unless you have a whole bucket load of money, you're not going to have that right off the bat. Just do what you have, use what you have to get started. Anything. And work up to those things that are your ideals. So where do you get your plants? There's all kinds of places to get your plants. You can go to your local nurseries, and I know a lot of people are interested now in heirloom varieties and things, and you're going to see your local nurseries now have a lot of those heirloom varieties and different things that you might want. In general, if you go to, you can go to farmers markets. You might find some specialty plants there. It depends what you're interested in. You can even go to your big box stores and your Walmarts. You're going to get the same basic stuff there all the time. You get your California Wonder Peppers and certain...
They're starting to get organic seeds in also.
Yes, I've noticed that.
Walmart and Home Depot.
I've noticed that. And we have talk about GMO seeds, and this is what I've heard, and I've been assured over and over again, that a home gardener can't buy GMO seed. They're not available at our level. Whether that's, I think there's so much scare over GMO that people feel like, that's not true, but that's supposedly a law. So you can go to your big box stores, Walmart, that's fine if that's where you want to go. Even Facebook Marketplace. I actually had a friend that got a lot of her plants off of Facebook Marketplace last year, and she gave me a couple of varieties that I hadn't grown before, which was really nice. You can even sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace. If you have an abundance of plants, you can go on there and sell yourself. There's Craigslist, and there's always friends, right? You can, this happens a lot with us. Our entire garden is from seed. It has been for a while, and I'll talk about that after. And I'm going to talk about it now. Or you grow your own. A lot of people are intimidated by growing their own starts. You can grow your whole garden and start it inside of your house if you have the right things. And here's some of the things that you'll need. One, obviously a dedicated area. You want an area that you're going to be able to keep your things. We lived in a bigger house before, and I had a whole room devoted to upstairs bedroom that I built. I had sawhorses, and I took some lattice and put it on there, and I hung from the ceiling. My husband loved this, by the way, and that's sarcasm. I hung from the ceiling shop lights at the time because that's what I had. You can use shop lights to grow. And I was growing tomatoes inside of our bedroom, our upstairs bedroom next to our bedroom. Well, what I didn't count on was you ever smell tomatoes up close, the plant itself? Wicked strong, right? So we were sleeping with a nice aromatic smell of tomatoes growing that year upstairs. Needless to say, I didn't grow tomatoes up there anymore. So you need a dedicated area. You need containers. And this is what I was talking about. There's all kinds of things that you can grow in, right? You can grow in a yogurt cup. You can grow in a solo cup. You can grow in an egg crate. You can grow in a toilet paper roll, cut in half. If you just make little cuts, fold in the bottom, and you get something that's biodegradable. It's wet, you stick it in the ground, the roots go right out the sides. You can grow in so many things. They have mini grow bags. They have plastic ones. I used these 1 year. They're good. They're okay. But I didn't like the idea of the plastic, you know? I didn't like the idea of all the plastic. And then there's these, and this is what I use now. These are nursery bags. And I told you to remember air pruning, right? When you use one of these nursery bags, okay, I'm going to show you. This is the size that the plastic one goes out to, okay? That's the plastic guy right there. Then there's this guy. You can get these on Amazon. They're called, like I said, nursery bags. And what the good thing is for me about these is you can do what you call air pruning. Do you ever see a root-bound plant, right? You see that it gets too stunted, it needs more room to grow, and then pretty soon the roots start growing in a spiral. And if you really let it go, they grow into a real hard mass. So that when you finally take it out of the pot, its growth has been stunted, and then you have to sit. And some plants will take you pulling on their roots. Other ones won't. They don't like it, and it'll really hinder the growth of the plant. So what happens inside of this is the plant starts to grow, the roots hit the edge. Now, do you ever see roots come up out of the ground? No. Roots are underground, right? And they stay underground. When they hit the side, they sense the air, the light, the everything, and they stop growing. But what they don't stop growing entirely. They send out lateral shoots. So instead of going around the pot, they stop and they get fluffier. You know, they fan out. So you'll have a nice big root ball inside of here. Now I'm going to show you something else. These are pepper plants inside of nursery pots, and they have perked up a little bit, actually. That's nice. We took them out in the cold this morning, and they were like, huh. So these are obviously summertime plants that you start earlier. I started these, I don't know, February something. And here they are, but I don't know if you can see that. You see these roots? Okay, they will come out of these bags. And the reason why they did is because I had them inside of one of these, and they were all packed in together so that their sides were touching. So they started to grow together. You know, all the roots did come through this bag because they were touching something else, they were being covered. But if I were to grow this out like it is, those roots wouldn't have come through. They would have come out the bottom. And they tell you that you can sink these into the ground and they'll grow, and they will. I've done it. But what I don't like is next year, I'm finding these, they say they're biodegradable, but I think it's gonna take a while for these to degrade. So what I end up doing is I take a pair of scissors to start them, and then you can pull right along this seam, and they just come apart. You gently put it in. The root ball isn't disturbed so much. It's not balled up. And I have a tendency to if you plant in smaller things, if you plant too early, if you're doing your seeds at home and you plant too early, you're going to have to do what they call potting up, right? You're going to have to pot up to a bigger size. What I like is maybe I'll start a tomato in this, and I won't have to pot it up. I'll just leave it in this size, and it just air prunes. I don't have to worry about the roots getting bound up. It's wonderful. But this also comes with the idea that it might dry out a little bit earlier. But when I have them all packed into one of these, this is called a 10-20 tray. When I have them all packed into a 10-20 tray and they're touching each other, they don't dry out that bad. And I just like them. I really love these nursery bags. And again, they come in all kinds of sizes. So you got that size there. Then you got this size there. All the way down to this little guy here, you know? And if you have a lettuce or something that isn't gonna take up a lot of root space and you're gonna move it out fairly quickly, because if you have started your own lettuce indoors, you know that it's pretty quick growing, and you're gonna put it out. And you're gonna plant them in succession, meaning you're gonna start some maybe 2 weeks here, 2 weeks further away, or 3, and you're gonna do that, and you're gonna keep putting your lettuce out. Or you can cut and come again. They have that kind of lettuce where you can cut them and they'll continue to grow. So there's containers. We need containers. And there's other things. Like I said, these 10-20 trays. You can get them all over the place. These are exceptionally strong. These are from Bootstrap Farmer. They're fantastic. I've left them out in the sun, in the rain, in the snow, and they're fantastic. If you've ever used the other 10-20 trays, they're much thinner. If you can use them over and over again. I don't baby my things a lot. I can be pretty hard on my garden stuff. So these are wonderful for me. They're a little bit more pricey, but they're gonna last you a long, long time. And they sell them, you see the slots? You can see the light through them. So what you end up doing is you buy a solid one, and you take one with slots, or also they have them like this that are really porous. And I've actually grown my onions in these before. What I've done is cut up some of these nursery bags and I lay them down inside of here so it's porous on the bottom. And then I just sprinkle onions inside of here, a whole bunch of them, grow them all together. You can do that with tomatoes too. You don't have to plant tomatoes individually. You can plant them in a mass, and tomatoes are really forgiving. You ever see the hairs on the stems, right? You can take, and I'm sure a lot of you that have grown tomatoes know that you can bury them deep. You can bury them with just like, 2 to 4 sets of leaves showing, and you're just gonna get a bigger root mass, because all those little hairs on the stem of a tomato is a potential root, and it'll just root. In fact, tomatoes were really kind of made to grow on the ground. We do something kind of unnatural to tomatoes. We prune them and set them upright, right? That's what we all do, most of us anyways. but they really are a vine and they want to grow on the ground. And when they do, they'll root right into the ground where they lay, you know, and you'll see them. They'll be attached all over the place. So what you do is you put your 10, 20 tray into your one. These are the ones both with holes. You don't want to do that. So you put the one with the holes inside of here, and what you do is you lift this one tray and you water from the bottom. And there's a good reason to water from the bottom, because you can have something called dampening off, where if your soil is too wet, right where the plant comes out, right here where it meets the soil, it rots, it gets weak. Your plants will look beautiful. You come back, bloop, they've fallen over and they die. That's dampening off, and there are ways that you can prevent that. One, don't water so much. Water from the bottom as well. You'll also prevent things like fungus gnats. If you've ever seen those, if you've grown plants inside, you get something that kind of looks like a little fruit fly, but it's a fungus gnat. If you overwater, which is one of the biggest mistakes that we make when we first start planting our own seeds, we love them to death, you know, we hover over them and wait for them to come up, and when they finally come up, we want to water them, right? And I've been guilty of this, and I've had things dampen off. So what you can use to stop dampening off is, one thing is vermiculite. If you've ever seen vermiculite, it had a little controversy way back when, but I know they've solved it. There was something in the manufacturing that wasn't great, but now they don't do that anymore. So vermiculite is light. It holds water. It also actually will break down. Have you ever seen in potting soil, you see the little white dots all through it? Lots of times that's perlite. It's either perlite or vermiculite. Perlite won't break down. It's not styrofoam, but it's like little styrofoam balls. And what it does is it creates air pockets inside of the soil, inside of the potting soil. Because when you first plant a plant, the roots are delicate. They can't really blister through this soil. It needs to be a light soil, okay? And that adds to that. It puts air inside, and it really is helpful for the roots to be able to move around. But there's vermiculite. What you can do with that is you add it on the top of the plant. Oftentimes, too, if we overwater, and I might have, okay, here we go. I don't know that you can see it, but you see the perlite in here. Do you see it has a little green hue on it? Can you see that from there? Okay. This is an algae, a fungus, algae that's grown on here. But what you can do to prevent that, and that's from overwatering. I'm more heavy-handed than not. I'm still learning to back off because I just want to love them to death, right? And you get this little green. It's not going to interfere with anything, that green on the top of your plants. But what you can do to stop it would be to put cinnamon. You can put cinnamon on top of here, and it will stop that from growing. And it will also deter fungus gnats as well. And so will the vermiculite. You put maybe 1/4 inch of vermiculite once things start to come up, and it'll stop the dampening off, the rotting of the plant, the stem, and it will also make it so that any extra, it's taking that extra moisture that would be around the stem and it's pulling it up into the vermiculite. And it's also stopping the fungus gnats. And I'm going to show you here. You see how there's a little seed cap, you know what I mean? The seed coating is still on there. Can you guys see that? What you can do with that, lick your fingers. There's an enzyme inside of our saliva. If you touch this, and if you have a hard time pulling this seed cap off, if you can't, just put, if you want to, maybe not everybody will want to do this, but put your saliva on it. There's an enzyme in here that will release this seed cap for us. Because oftentimes you'll try to pull them off and it will damage the leaf, right? So that's a little handy trick too. I want to say all these pepper plants were grown at exactly the same time, but they all saw different conditions. You can get different results. This, exactly the same day, exactly the same soil. everything. This saw less water and less light. This guy got the opposite. And you see what's happened. And that can happen in your batch of plants. Ooh, and this is actually an artichoke. We really don't grow these around here very well because artichoke usually is something that comes up on a second-year plant and it's in a warmer climate. But we got green globes that we can grow. And we can use these as an annual. So I, last year, successfully had artichokes from my backyard, which was really cool. I got 3 or 4 of them. The groundhog got 5 of my 6 plants. So in a panic, I had 1 left. And you know what he would do? He ate the root from the bottom and then pulled the plant into the ground. So there was just a hole, no plant, nothing left. Either that or just the tips of the leaves sticking out. Every day I'd go out, there'd be 1 more missing, and then finally I just wasn't gonna stand for it anymore. Took my last artichoke plant and put it inside one of those giant grow bags, and pretty soon I'm gonna uncover it and see if I was able to overwinter it in our New England weather, so I'm hoping. But yeah, I got like 3 or 4 artichokes, which was really cool, because that's something I'd never grown before. And look at, that's a bee, right? Patting the plant, that shows you, yeah. Anyway, so you got these 10, 20 trays. You can put those those nursery bags inside of them. I really love doing it this way. Bottom watering. I may have gotten ahead of myself. Yes?
Could you please repeat how cinnamon helps the plants with the moisture?
It's not the moisture that it helps with the fungus gnats. Or the fungus itself, actually, too. It'll be a fungus deterrent. Yeah. If you have an active fungus gnat problem, it will help with that. There are other things that you can do to deter them, like the vermiculite. Those are the methods that I use. You can go to greater lengths to prevent them or to get rid of them, but I find that the cinnamon works really well. They also sell these, and if you don't overwater, you shouldn't have a fungus gnat problem. I just have a tendency to overwater. I just do, because I'm always, oftentimes we might not be around for a couple days and I'm just worried I'm going to lose my plants when they're gone, so I just, overwater them. But they also have these little yellow cards, and they're sticky on both sides, and you can get those on Amazon too. And you just peel the sides off, you stick it. I have ones that are in the shape of like a butterfly and a sun and all that stuff, and it's got a point on the bottom, and you stick it into the soil somewhere on your tray, and maybe you have a few of them around if you have a fungus gnat problem. And this thing sticks up out of the soil. Don't touch it, because it'll stick to your clothes. It's stuck to my head. I've had them hanging from my grow lights before, and not thinking, I put my head in there and it's stuck to my head, and it's not fun. So, but they're really great for getting rid of those fungus gnats too, because it's just like those old fly traps that you used to hang from the ceiling. They stick to it. Not real fun for them, but.
And they're sold on Amazon too?
Yeah.
You just Google what fungus gnat.
No, you can just do like sticky cards, gardening sticky cards or something like that. I mean, you can buy them in bigger sheets too. There's like if you have blueberry plants, my brother had trouble with those blueberry maggots, right? And they come in as a flying insect. What they'll do is they'll get attracted to these yellow cards, and they'll stick to them. And you'll have a whole lot less of a problem. And you can just hang those near your plants. And they can get wet and everything, and nothing happens to them. Nothing it just, the water just rolls off of them. So seeds. I have a sheet in here that the seed companies that I use. I have a tendency to go to Baker Creek, to Johnny's Seeds, to Fruition Seed. There's a few that I use over and over again just because I've found that the quality is good. There's something about it that attracts me. And I have a confession to make. I have a seed problem. This is only my current stock, okay? And I'm serious when I say that. This is just what I'm using right now. These things are fantastic. If you want to store seeds, they're awesome. You know what they are? They're picture holders. They're the picture holders. But what you can do is, and this is what I've done, I've found out that I'm tired of being behind on different plants. Everything grows at different rates. Everything needs a little something different, you know? So I've decided I was gonna get organized, especially last year. And what I did is I went out and bought these. I separated all my seeds into different categories, like things. Like right now, this is where I'll be picking out of. This is my cool weather seeds. So I know that at this time of year, I can open this up, and in here is everything that I'm gonna find for my cool weather crops. I got lettuces, parsnip, broccoli, kohlrabi, leeks, onions, turnips, cauliflower, and what I do is I know my general frost date, when my last frost is. So then I look on the back of my seed package, and it says, how long am I running here? I'm running pretty long, aren't I? Am I running a little long? I don't want to run too long. But I look on the back of my package, and it's telling me it sprouts in 7 to 14 days. Okay, I know this is a frost hardy thing. It says yes, it's frost hardy, so it doesn't mind if it frosts. It tells me how deep to plant them, and it tells me I can go online and look up spinach and say, when can I plant spinach indoors? And it'll say 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. So that's what I do. So then on this container, this is all spinach, and I write direct. In my case, I like to direct sow spinach. You can do it inside, but it's a direct sow. I put it in blue because that means it's cold. 6 weeks before my last frost date. And then I take this. Very simple. I just cut out a cardboard box. It has my last frost date. It's anywhere between April 30th and May 14th, and that can change like the weather changes. Over the years, your grow zone and your frost dates can change a little bit. And what I do is, this is 12 weeks away from our last frost. Oh, sorry. This is 12 weeks away from our last frost. So I've written February 19th through the 25th. I'm going to plant these things either indoors or outdoors, okay? And that's what I do. And then I do week 11, week 10, week 9, all the way back. And what I do is, when it's the winter time, I sit with all my seeds that I've ordered because I've sat in bed looking at all my catalogs and gotten all my wish list stuff, right? And then I start figuring out when these things need to get planted. So I stick them inside the envelopes, and it's an easy system. Then I can close this and put them away again for another year, and I got my whole garden inside here that tells me exactly when to plant these things. If you can do things like this and make life easier for yourself, I suggest doing it. It's great. So like I said, this is just a fraction of what I have for seeds. And sometimes people think that seeds are not viable after the date that they've been, that it says on the package. That's not true. You might lose a little bit of germination. Some things lose a little bit more germination than others. But you'd be surprised how long seeds can last if they're kept in a decent condition. If they're cool, dry place, yeah. So a light source, you're going to need a light source. You can use a regular light bulb. You can use a regular shop light. Now a lot of lights are LED. I'm going to squeeze back here. And if you use a shop light, you're going to have to keep the light about 2 inches away from your seedlings when they grow. Or you can get something like this. Which actually, I got that on Amazon. That's about $100 light.
Can you unplug that and pull it out so we can see it not fit up?
Yeah, sure. Sure. But you can spend a lot of money on grow lights, or you can spend next to nothing. The weaker lights, like I said, you're going to have to continue to raise them and raise them and raise them as your plants grow. Not to mention, if you're growing tomatoes, these are LED lights. These are Samsung diodes. They're pretty quality. This is one of the very cheaper grow lights for the quality that it is. I mean, it's really a heavy-duty light. It'll last you years and years and years. It doesn't suck a ton of electricity up, as opposed to some of the old grow lights. They really will jack up your light bill. I have quite a few grow lights. My light bill still goes a little bit high because I got a lot of grow lights. But anyways, this is from Spider Farmer. Spider Farmer. And also I'll have these inside my handout too. I have a little list of products that I use that I like that I put in there. So you'll need a light source. If you put your seedlings or your seeds as they grow on a windowsill, unless it's a south-facing windowsill and you get 6 to 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks of light, 6 to 8 hours of light, they're going to become what we call leggy. They're going to be reaching for the sun, right? They're going to get really skinny and spindly, and it's really going to affect the plant later in its life. If you have a good light source, you're going to get a plant. I mean, look at the size of this stem on a small. If I would have stuck these in the windowsill, they'd be wicked skinny, and they just look sickly. I mean, these are a little rough looking just because they shouldn't be out of there. It's too cold for them out here. When I first brought them into this room, they literally were wilting. And you can still see they have a little bit of an issue, but I need to separate these. But this is a nice hardy pepper plant. It's because it's received what it's needed. So you need a good light source. And like I said, it can be a shop light, it can be anything, but you're going to be raising those lights with the height of the plant. And if you got tomatoes that are this high right now, and lettuces that are next to it, you're going to be a little off kilter. Whereas if you have one of these lights, it's brighter, you can hang it from a high spot and it'll get everything. So I found, for me, that's good, but you can use just about anything. Let's see, a seed starting mix. I use ProMix right now. Eventually, I'd like to use Fort V. I haven't used that yet, but I know there's a ton of people that rave about the Fort V. This is Vermont compost potting soil. It's wonderful. A lot of professionals use that because it just grows such great little seedlings, so strong. But the ProMix, a lot of people for a long time use that. I use ProMix. I don't have any problem with it. I take worm castings and mix it with that. I might even take a little bit of my own compost. I know a lot of people said that can spread disease, and it can, but I myself have never really had a problem. And I don't mix a ton in with it because it'll be too hard for those little baby roots to press through. But I do mix a little bit in with it. And then I'll take some of that vermiculite.
Is it one or the other? Is it one or the other, or do you use both of these?
I don't use this one. I think I will. I would like to anyways. I haven't gotten it yet. Actually, Jimmy bought this bag, and he's going to use that this year. But I do use the ProMix.
Now, you're saying go lower on the worm castings, is that what you're saying?
You know, I wouldn't do a ton of worm castings either, but I do put that in there. You want your potting mix to be light. You want your baby roots to be able to press through that soil, because if it's too heavy, they're not going to be able to move. And, you know, they just won't grow well.
What is a worm casting? Is that actually a worm or is it
No, it's actually the waste of a worm. I'm going to tell that story. And as the plant grows, you're going to see These are what you call cotyledon leaves. These are the first leaves you see emerge. And then you start to see the leaves of the mature plant. When you start to see the leaves of the mature plant, you can use a mild fertilizer. A lot of people like to use like a liquid fish fertilizer or something. That's what I would use, is a liquid fish fertilizer, which you see right here. I think it's the third bottle, is it that?
Yes.
But anyways, you use a weaker version. You don't want to use exactly what they say on the label at this stage because it'd just be too much. You just use a diluted form of something like that. Because at that point, up until that point, when you see these leaves, they've been able to live off the nutrition that's actually contained in the seed itself. But beyond that point, it starts to need something to eat. You know what I mean? So that's when you start to either fertilize. Like I said, I have a little bit of compost in here, and I might add something. You see that grower's honey there? I might dilute that down and put it in here as they're growing. Depends how long I have to put them outside too. So I don't want to take up too much time here. So you got to mind patience. Patience. That's the thing that you want too. We really want patience, because I don't know about you guys, but I stick my seeds in the soil and I'm just like, okay, all right, I'm gonna walk away. Come back 30 minutes later. You know, I'm like the anxious parent, you know, waiting for their baby to come or something. And when the first few little pieces of green start poking up, I'm like, so excited. It's very exciting for me. Some plants, when you start them, like peppers, not all, but you can get propagation domes, okay? These are propagation domes. These I got on Amazon, pretty cheap. They have little air vents. There's a point, once things start to sprout, you want to take the propagation dome off. There aren't too many things you want to leave this on, because it's actually going to become a problem after a while. It's going to be too much for the plant. Like when I start peppers, I put a propagation dome on top of them, because they want heat. You might want a heat mat, you know, or if you have a refrigerator, when they start to germinate, maybe you can put them on top of your fridge because it's a little bit warm up there, you know. It's higher and you got an appliance that's running. But I grow inside of a grow tent down in my basement, and I have heat mats. I actually have these temperature guides. I can see exactly what temperature my seedlings are and all that stuff, and this is why gardening is not cheap for me. So yeah, propagation domes, but take them off. They have, that's a pretty high one. They have these. Oh, I'm sorry.
On top of that black tray.
That's exactly what it'll do. It fits on top of a 10-20 tray. That's what they call them, 10-20 trays. I'm sorry.
How long do you keep it on typically? For any seed? You do it for any seed?
You could do it for any seed, but as it starts to sprout, you want to take it off once it's sprouted. Yeah.
Use the cotyledons, like it's just that?
Say that again.
Even if it's just one or two leaves?
As it starts to, yeah, say you got about a third of them starting to pop up, then I'd probably pull it off. Yeah. But and two, if you have them on the heat, you want to either lower the heat or take them off of the heat altogether. Some things don't want heat when they're starting to grow. If you're growing onions, you don't want these on heat. They're a cool weather crop. They'll do fine. They do fine in my basement, not on a heat mat. Okay, and I put these in, I think this is a 72. I'll show you. I put it upside down on another one. And now I can just pinch the bottom of those. Doesn't disturb the root all that much. And I got a bunch of these onions that I'll put in. And I'll put these out when they're probably about yay high, a little bit thicker. I might feed these, you know, before I stick them out and let them get a little bit stronger. This is something else you can do to your seedlings. Either have a fan that blows on them occasionally, because this mimics the wind. This is one of the things that your seedlings, when they're fresh, they're going to face when you put them out in the weather, is they're going to get wind, and they've never gotten that before. So you put this on, and it will naturally strengthen the stem of the plant. Okay? So that's either that or you can go in and just brush your hand over them every now and then. It simulates that too. Okay. So patience, patience. So yeah, starting seeds at home. That's my dining room table. I don't know that you want to come to my house to eat now that you've seen that. But yeah, those are lime trees, and that's pretty much what it looks like in the springtime at our house. That first picture over there, those are sweet potatoes that we have gotten from Japan. We're trying now to grow sweet potatoes here. It's not a northern crop per se, but Japan has some climates that are like ours. So we're trying. Last year, we weren't too successful. We got some really thick looking roots, but not anything that I'd call a sweet potato. But as you can see in the second one, you can see that they're sprouting. You stick them in a 10-20 tray, you bury them halfway up, you keep them moist, you keep a propagation dome on them until they start really growing. And then if you'll see in the next picture, that is that sweet potato. And that sweet potato, if you look, there's a nodule every 4 inches. Every one of those is a plant. So there's hundreds of plants here by the time it's done. And what you can do is when they grow, when they sprout, you break them off and you stick them in a little water and they'll just root. And then you plant them. So this is our setup. This is pretty much, you see the grow lights hanging from the top. You see the seedlings on the bottom. There's onions, there's peppers. That's this year. That's what my grow tent looks like right now. When it was brand new, the middle picture, that's what it was. It was clear and open, and it's got like reflective sides, and you hang the lights from the top. And you use these. This is how I turn my lights on and off. I got an automatic timer that plugs in. I plug it into here. I set it for an amount of time. I can plug a whole strip plug into this one thing, and it'll shut off at a certain time at night. It'll turn on again in the morning. I don't have to do anything. And these are real cheap. Amazon. Everything, right? Amazon. So, you know, you can plant, you see I'm planting in all kinds of containers too. I'm not necessarily just planting in nursery bags. And then this is probably one of the hardest things about starting seeds from home is something we do called hardening off. Now you've had this plant in this controlled environment. You want to put it outside. If you put it outside, right, fresh from your protected environment, it's going to get sunburned. Plants get sunburnt, okay? You put them out there, the new weather conditions are really going to stress them out, can kill them. So you got to do it over about a 7-day process, and you do it a little bit at a time. You do an hour here, you do maybe a couple hours the next day, a few hours, you keep them in the shade, and gradually you work them until they can take full sun, and it takes about a week. Not everybody has that kind of time. There are ways that you can cut the process down. You can get a shade cloth, put it out. You can get a heavier shade cloth and lay it over your plants, hold them up with maybe some of that PVC pipe, which is what we do. I get a heavier shade cloth and I can leave it out there all day until I get home. And then I put on a different kind of, and that's cheap too. You can buy cheap shade cloth. And then I'll go with a lighter shade cloth that lets a little bit more sunshine in. You can do it that way too. But that's probably the hardest thing I would say about growing your own seeds, but it's really not hard. Again, lettuce, onions. I have my onions under shop lights, you can see there. There's my little gardening buddy in his house, his protected house, and some more lettuce. It's Chris and I planting an apple tree at 11 o'clock at night, and our neighbor's probably thinking we're pretty strange, but that's the time that we had to plant it. So we planted our apple trees at 11 o'clock at night by flashlight and by, yeah. So it's Farmer Chris and Farmer Charlie. This is more of our shot. This is our garden here that we have now. That's a better shot of the garden when it had all grass on the ground rather than wood chips. But we grow a little bit of everything. The only thing I haven't been able to grow successfully is corn. And I'm starting to use fish fertilizer. We use a lot of plant products to amend our soil. But you can use animal products too. We just choose in a lot of cases not to. But this year I'm going to use fish fertilizer. But you don't need This lady right here in the second row has been for the last decades, faithfully. She grinds up her waste products, her fruit and vegetable waste products in a blender and goes out and just tosses them on her garden. She has soil that looks like this. And it grows corn, it's just black. It grows corn beautifully, doesn't need anything because she's fed the soil just constantly, every week or whatever they do. They just throw it out there, throw it out there, throw it out there. They don't need to use anything for fertilizer. And it's because they've built their soil up so wonderfully. And you can do that too. We don't need fertilizers. It's just our soils need to be built up. So again, here's stuff. There's cardboard we've laid down. You know, there's those trellises I was talking about. Do you see those? Those are the cattle panels that are bent. Just different things that we're growing. And there you'll see our blueberries. And there's the PVC bent in half. And we use this netting over it. That'll keep out the birds because birds, you know, they're going to eat your blueberries. So we cover with those. Here's some of the produce from our garden, and it's just wonderful to have all this stuff. We got tri-colored strawberries, raspberries. And if you grow garlic, you can take the scapes. That's what that is over there. You can take the top of the garlic, and it tastes like garlic, but it's green. You just chop that up. And again, the variety is enormous. When you're growing your own things, if you're growing your own things, the variety is humongous. It's really kind of limitless. And we had a gardening seminar last year. You can't see me, but I'm in that picture. You see that cabbage? I'm behind that cabbage. That cabbage was, with the leaves and everything, was probably like that big. And that lettuce, I mean, that's just beautiful. You know, and it has flavor. And you can put color. That's the salad, all from the garden. Those are edible flowers right there. And they taste just a little tiny bit spicy. Those are just zinnias next to it, but you can get all that color out of your garden. There's the watermelons that I was talking about. So good, so good.
Garlic.
Yeah, and all that garlic lined up drying. There's chives. You ever see asparagus growing? That's one of the first things that'll come up. If you treat your asparagus well, it will last for up to 50 years, about 30 to 50 years, and it'll be the first thing that comes up. It's a little labor intensive at first. You got to bury it kind of deep. If you buy 2 or 3 year crowns, they look like these big alien octopuses, but you stick them about a foot underground, cover them up, really rich soil they like, and they'll come up and you just, oh, and it's so good. It tastes so good. Everything's so different. Potatoes, you got some new potatoes and you got some larger potatoes and beets. And now we got intermission. And I'm going to invite Sherry back up again. That's my garden buddy, just in case you didn't know.
All right, I think it's time for us to raffle off a couple of our gifts
We're
here.
going to do the 4 books.
So you have 4, right?
Yes, ma'am.
We have 2 gardening books that we are going to be giving away, 2 of each, right, Amanda?
Yep, 2 of each, so there'll be 4 people picked.
4 people.
This is Luke Marion. He does the Autopilot Garden. If you go onto his YouTube channel, you're going to find a lot of specific instructions. If you say you want to grow celery, Luke will tell you how to grow celery exactly. Okay, you can go in and find gardening guides for particular things. And Jessica Sowards, she's the one that said tomatoes taste like disappointment. Okay, stored tomatoes taste like disappointment. She's fantastic. She's a great teacher, and I would recommend her anytime. This is her basic gardening book, and it's fantastic. So we got 2 copies of this and 2 copies of that.
So we are
Don't anybody feel left out, because everybody's going to receive one of those bags, and you're not getting a very bad hookup here. We got gardening gloves. I'm just going to pull out what we're giving away. We got some 2-inch seed starter pots that can be sunk right into the ground. The roots will come out the sides, or you can pull the bottoms off. We got garden clips for like your tomato plants. We have some of these nursery bags so you can try them for yourselves, okay, for that air pruning. We got, do you remember what I said? Remember this from the beginning? I showed you this. We got a little bag of these peat pellets. You put them in water and they expand. Oh, sorry.
Away from the computer.
They expand and you put a seed up here. These are really good for lettuce. I like them for lettuce, but you can use them for just about anything. But again, remember they're small, okay? But you got a bag of those. And then we have some plant markers. We have seeds. And we put inside of this bag a explanation of what seeds are in here. These, if anybody's a flower lover, at the bottom you'll see a wildflower blend of either hummingbird or butterfly and bee mix. You got some bush beans, provider. They're real heavy. That's what they are. They're providers. They heavily fruit. Everything's organic, okay, except for the flower seeds. We didn't get those organic. But you got a cherry tomato called the Sunrise Bumblebee, which is really sweet, a nice tomato. These are all from Johnny Seeds, except one. You got a German Johnson, which is a big slicer tomato, okay, organic again. You got a San Marzano 2, okay? I know a lot of people have heard of San Marzano. This is a paste tomato. This is what you can use to make your sauces. Okay, the big German Johnson is a slicer. Oh boy, I wish I'm going to show you the picture of this. This is from Baker Creek, and this is a Kajari melon. It's a Kajari melon. I'm going to tell you about a Kajari melon. It looks like, you can see it, almost looks like a beach ball, right? Isn't it beautiful? It's orange and green and cream. And you know when this melon is ripe because it just falls off the vine into your hand or onto the ground, and the ants will get it if you don't get it first. So check these. It's pretty prolific. It's like a single serving for a person or maybe a couple that doesn't want to eat so much. They are amazingly sweet. I love Kajari melons, and they add beauty to your garden, okay? So there's pictures of all these seeds in here and a description of each and where you can get them if you wanted to get them again. We have other handouts in here. We also have, like I said, I have my full PowerPoint on here also, all the bullets. And this is being recorded. It will be put on maybe YouTube. It'll be put on YouTube. Okay, we have a bookmark, and we have a mini greenhouse, one of those little, like a mini 1020 tray, but it's not a 1020. It's probably a 4-6, you know. But there's a bunch of handouts in there. There's actually something about natural remedies, so there's stuff about health, and again, it'll tell you how to look up your grow zone. It'll tell you where to get seeds that I like to get seeds from, good seeds as far as I'm concerned. It says where I get compost. The best compost that I've found so far in Massachusetts is a place called Martin's Farm. It's in Greenfield. If you're going to go, you have to travel for it, but it is amazing. They will deliver here. It's a little bit pricey, but it's the best compost I've ever found in Massachusetts. It's just great. He was organic all the way up to the point where it was just so hard to keep up with the organic standards, but he's just under the margin. It's really fantastic stuff. I got the seed starting mixes, the grow light that I use, the seed containers, the cattle panel, the wood chips, the plug timer, the red worms, wigglers, which you get at Uncle Jim's Worm Farm in the mail if you're interested. I use compost tea. You put stuff inside of this bag, okay? It's a couple part thing. You put it inside water, you put air inside of the water, and it generates like a liquid compost. It's like liquid gold for your plants. And they say, their slogan is, your plants dance when you put this stuff on them. And they do, and it's everything natural. There's nothing chemical about this. Then the leftover stuff inside the bag, you can just toss on the bottom of something, and it just doesn't add to the growth. Insect frass, which is sampled over there. You're going to see my 6 mil plastic, other stuff, all the YouTube channels that I love that are really, instructional. So sorry. Okay. All that's inside of this bag. And you're just going to get it. Everybody's going to get it.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.